Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. When some people say, we're family, we should share, what they really mean is, hand over the jewelry or I'll break in while you're gone. Today in the rLounge, family entitlement doesn't knock politely. It shows up with bolt cutters. Sister-in-law broke into my house to steal my inheritance. Now she's homeless after I cut her off financially. My grandmother passed away 3 months ago, and I'm still processing everything that's happened since then. She lived with me for the last 4 years of her life after her health started declining. We were always close, but those years together created an even deeper bond between us. I, 33 male, was the one who drove her to doctor appointments, made sure she took her medicine, and spent evenings watching her favorite old movies together. When she passed and the will was read, I learned she had left me about 80% of her estate, which totaled around $1.2 million. This included her house, which I was already living in, her investment portfolio, and some cash savings. My older brother, 38 male, received 15%, and the remaining 5% went to charity that had been important to her. I wasn't surprised by the distribution. My brother had always been distant from our grandmother. He visited maybe twice a year, sent generic birthday cards, and rarely called. I don't think he expected to get much, but his wife, my sister-in-law, had different expectations. From the moment the will was read, I could feel the tension. My brother didn't say much, but sister-in-law, 36 female, couldn't hide her disappointment. She kept making these little comments about how surprising the distribution was and how she thought family assets should be shared equally. The final real issue happened at a family dinner about 2 weeks after the funeral. Sister-in-law kept asking very specific questions about what I'd inherited. So what are you going to do with all that money? Are you going to sell the house? What about those antique jewelry pieces your grandmother had? I kept my answers vague, saying I hadn't made any decisions yet. Then she said, well, we could really use some help with our mortgage. It would be a shame for all that money to just sit there when family needs help. I changed the subject, but the pattern was established. Every time I saw them, there'd be some comment about my inheritance and hints about their financial needs. Then, sister-in-law started showing up at my house unannounced. The first time, she brought over some cookies and said she was just checking in on me to see how I was doing. I thought it was a nice gesture until she asked for a tour of the house. I've always loved this place. I want to see what you're planning to change now that it's yours. During the tour, she just kept pointing at those saying, that would look perfect in our living room, or I've always loved that painting. She started coming by more frequently, always with some flimsy excuse. Each time, she'd wander around the house, commenting on things she liked. I started noticing that after her visits, small items would be missing. At first, I thought I was misplacing things in my grief, but after the third or fourth time, it became obvious what was happening. I texted sister-in-law about the missing items. She immediately got defensive. Are you accusing me of stealing? I can't believe you would think of that of me. You're being paranoid. Within an hour, my brother called, yelling about how I had attacked his wife and how disrespectful I was being. I tried to explain that items were disappearing, but he wasn't listening. He kept saying I was hoarding our grandmother's things and being selfish. A few weeks later, I had plans to go away for the weekend with some friends. We were supposed to stay until Sunday evening, but plans changed and we came back Saturday afternoon instead. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my brother's car parked down the street. It seemed weird since I hadn't told anyone I was going away for the weekend. I entered quietly through the garage and immediately heard someone moving around upstairs. I checked my phone and saw the security camera alerts I'd missed while driving. Sister-in-law was in my house, going through my things. I watched the live feed on my phone for a minute. She was in my office, taking photos of financial documents and slipping small items into her purse. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I went upstairs and found her rifling through my desk drawers. She jumped and dropped the paper she was holding. Oh, you scared me. I was just checking on the house for you. The door was unlocked, so I got worried. That was a blatant lie. I'd double-checked all the locks before leaving. How'd you get in? She hesitated before saying, I used the spare key under the flower pot. There's no key there. How'd you really get in? She started gathering her things quickly. I don't appreciate your tone. I was doing you a favor by checking on the place. You're going through my financial documents and putting things in your purse. I can see the security footage on my phone right now. Her face went pale. She hadn't realized there were cameras. Those are just some family photos I wanted copies of. You're being ridiculous. I pointed to my grandmother's pearl earrings sticking out of her purse. Are those photos too? She pushed past me and headed for the stairs. I'm not staying here to be accused like this. You've changed since getting all this money. You're becoming paranoid and greedy. I followed her downstairs. Give me back everything you took, now. She dumped a few items on the entryway table. The earrings, a small crystal figurine, and a gold money clip that had belonged to my grandfather. Happy now? I was just borrowing these to show my mother. I was going to bring them back. I pointed to the door. Get out. And whatever key you have, leave it. She threw a key at me, one I'd never seen before, and stormed out. I immediately called a locksmith and had all the locks changed that day. I texted both my mother-in-law and my brother, stating that after today's incident, neither had permission to enter my property without any explicit invitation, and any future unauthorized entry would be reported to the police. My brother called almost immediately, yelling about how I was tearing the family apart and being dramatic. I didn't argue. I just told him I had security footage of his wife breaking into my house and stealing from me. There was a long pause before he changed his tone. Look, I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. She was probably just looking for that family photo album Mom's been asking about. You're making this into something it's not. I also discovered that my brother and sister-in-law had been struggling financially for years. They lived in a house they couldn't afford, drove luxury cars with hefty payments, and took expensive vacations they couldn't pay for. They've been receiving loans from my parents for years, money that was never repaid. Sister-in-law had apparently been counting on a large inheritance to bail them out of their financial mess. The next day, my parents called to tell me that sister-in-law was spreading rumors about me hoarding the family money and refusing to help my brother when they were about to be homeless. I explained what had happened, showed them the security footage, and listed the items that were still missing. They were shocked but not entirely surprised. Apparently, sister-in-law had been borrowing things from their house for years too, items that were never returned. They admitted they'd given my brother and sister-in-law over $30,000 in the past year alone for various emergencies. My father said, "We didn't want to see it. We thought we were helping them through a rough patch, but it never ends." I feel validated knowing I wasn't the only one who's been taken advantage of, but it didn't make the situation any easier. My relationship with my brother was effectively over, at least for now. The most disturbing part of all this isn't the attempted theft or the lies. It's the entitlement. The belief that they deserve what I have simply because we share DNA. That my grandmother's wishes don't matter. That my role in caring for her doesn't matter. All that matters to them is getting their hands on money they didn't earn or deserve. I never thought my own family would try to steal from me, but here we are. I guess inheritance really does bring out the worst in some people. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last update, and the situation is completely imploded. For those asking for updates, here's where things stand now. My brother and sister-in-law lost their house to foreclosure. It finally happened after months of missed payments. I found out when my brother texted me asking if they could temporarily move in with me until they get back on their feet. His message was surprisingly humble. No demands, just a straightforward request. I had to turn him down. After everything that happened, there was no way I could have them in my home. I suggested they move in with sister-in-law's parents, who live about an hour away and have plenty of space. Turns out that wasn't an option. Sister-in-law's parents flatly refused to take them in. According to my mom, who still talks to sister-in-law's mother occasionally, they've had their own issues with sister-in-law stealing from them over the years. They told my brother they'd take him in alone, but not with sister-in-law. He chose to stick with her, which I guess shows loyalty if nothing else. My parents agreed to let my brother stay with him, but they also refused to let sister-in-law move in. They said they couldn't trust her in their house, which I think is completely reasonable given everything that's happened. They created a bizarre situation where my brother started sleeping at our parents' house while sister-in-law bounced around staying with various friends. That arrangement lasted about 2 weeks before drama erupted again. My brother-in-law sent me a panicked message saying sister-in-law had maxed out all of their remaining credit cards, taken their only working car, and disappeared. He hadn't heard from her in 3 days and was freaking out. I suggested he file a police report for the car, but he was reluctant. I told him I couldn't help locate her, but that he should seriously consider contacting authorities if he was genuinely concerned for her safety. He eventually did, and they found the car abandoned in a shopping mall parking lot 2 towns over. It had significant damage to the front end, like she'd hit something and just left it there. Their insurance refused to cover the repairs because they suspected fraud based on the circumstances. Sister-in-law showed back up at my parents' house about 5 days after disappearing, acting like nothing unusual had happened. She claimed she needed a break and had been staying with a friend. She didn't mention the car at all until my brother brought it up, then shrugged it off, saying it was already falling apart anyway. That was the breaking point for my brother. He told her he wanted a separation. They had a massive fight on my parents' front lawn that got so loud the neighbors called the police. No arrests were made, but it was apparently the wake-up call my brother needed. He officially moved all of his stuff into my parents' guest room and told sister-in-law it was over. He called me that night and apologized for everything. He admitted he'd been in denial about sister-in-law's behavior for years, making excuses and covering for her because he couldn't face the reality of who she really was. He said he should have believed me from the start about the break-in and theft. I thought that might be the end of the drama, but I was wrong. About a week later, around 2 a.m., my security system alerted me to someone in my backyard. I checked the cameras and saw sister-in-law trying to break in through my back door. She was clearly intoxicated, stumbling around and muttering to herself. She had bolt cutters and a bag full of tools. I called the police immediately. They arrived within minutes and arrested her for attempted breaking and entering. The security footage made it an open and shut case. She was booked and spent the night in jail. She was released on bail the next day with conditions including staying away from my property. My brother filed for divorce shortly after her arrest. He told me sister-in-law's behavior has been escalating for years, but he'd always managed to talk her down or clean up the aftermath before they got too out of hand. He said he felt partly responsible for not getting her help sooner, but also acknowledged that she'd consistently refused therapy or medication when he'd suggested it in the past. The court hearing for sister-in-law happened last week. She was charged with multiple counts: theft, identity fraud, attempted breaking and entering, and violating bail conditions. She was sentenced to 18 months, with mandatory counseling during her incarceration. The rest of the family has finally gotten the full picture of what's been happening. Sister-in-law's parents reached out to apologize. They thought marriage had settled her down and were shocked to learn how bad things had gotten. My brother-in-law is staying with our parents while he gets back on his feet. He's taking a second job to start paying down the debt and is selling off everything of value that he still owns. It's going to be a long road for him, but at least he's facing reality now. That's where things stand now. Honestly, the biggest red flag here isn't even the break-in. It's that her own parents wouldn't let her move back in. Like, if your mom and dad won't take you in during a crisis, that says everything. Parents will usually make room for their kids even if it means sleeping on the couch themselves. For them to flat out say, nope, not with her, tells you it's not just you seeing the pattern. This is who she's always been. It's not you being selfish. Everyone around her has dealt with this same behavior, and everyone's hitting the same brick wall with her at some point. They just didn't have their grandmother's jewelry or $1.2 million estate at stake. Do you have your own nasty story about inheritance? Share it with us in the comments. We want the tea. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time. And please put your chair back where you found it.